It was on this day 25 years ago, July the 10th, 2000, that Coldplay released its debut album, Parachutes. 4 singles released from the album, including that one right there called Yellow. And I figure in the midst of a 4-show appearance in Toronto, why not play a little Yellow from Coldplay to begin our show today? 25 years ago, the album Parachutes released. Hey, good Thursday morning. It's July the 10th. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for stopping by and spending some of your valuable time with us. I don't say that often enough. I really appreciate the ears that you lend our show and the voice that you give to it as well as we interact here on the show. You know, I'm thinking of a new movie. I'm going to work on the script. Let me know what you think of this as a plot for a potential. I don't know if it's a romantic comedy or a romantic tragedy, but let's just say first date in Toronto. And they say, no, let's wait. See, this is all coming to me, stream of consciousness. Let's go even further than that and make it a couple that plans a date at Rogers Centre for a Blue Jays game, during which the guy is going to propose. It's going to go up on the Jumbotron at Rogers Centre. Except she goes to Rogers Stadium by mistake because, you know, Rogers Centre, Rogers Stadium, ends up at the Coldplay show, meets some other guy, and lives happily ever after with him. I think I'm onto something here. I just might be onto something here. I noticed on breakfast television this morning, they were discussing Hugh Grant. Maybe Hugh Grant, he's always been in the romantic comedies. Hugh Grant apparently fell asleep while watching a match at Wimbledon. So this week in the news, we have learned that Prime Minister Mark Carney does not flip pancakes well, tried and failed at the Calgary Stampede, and now Hugh Grant fell asleep at a tennis match on a sunny afternoon in England. Like, have I covered the stories that you need to have covered? This is the information that you need in your world, right? On a slightly more serious note, is it just me, or is the whole Donald Trump thing getting a little bit old? And look, I understand that if you are trying to make a living in an industry that is affected by the on-again, off-again tariffs, this tariff today, that tariff tomorrow, now this tariff being removed, etc., I can only imagine the frustration and the anxiety that comes with that. But I've basically tuned it out now. It's just white noise to me. Oh, Donald Trump said something again? I heard somebody else put it this way. I'll paraphrase, but it's like Donald Trump gets up every morning and decides to produce another reality show. So what does he have to do on this day to bring the latest bit of attention or the latest plot twist in his ongoing reality show? A new script for which he writes every single day. I've just grown really weary of it. Copper tariffs are the tariffs to be aware of today. But tomorrow, who the heck knows? Let's get to your Farwell Show 5 for this Thursday morning. Number 1, local health officials say Israeli strikes pounded the Gaza Strip last night and into this morning, killing at least 34 Palestinians. Among the dead are 10 people who were waiting for care outside a medical clinic. Aid workers call this a violation of humanitarian laws. Number 2, the federal government is launching a new review to cut red tape across the public service. Cabinet ministers are expected to review regulations in the next 60 days in their portfolios and propose actions to remove outdated rules and reduce duplication with provinces. This comes as Ottawa also looks to cut spending by 7.5% in the next fiscal year in most federal departments. Number 3 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, the Cambridge Shelter Corporation, a.k.a. The Bridges, is looking for support for its breakfast meal delivery program. The Bridges says it needs donations of ground coffee, bagels, cereal, and personal hygiene items to support the program. The shelter prepares and serves over 2,200 breakfasts every month. Donations can be dropped off during the day at 26 Simcoe Street in Cambridge. Number 4, almost 10,000 college faculty and staff have either been let go or are projected to lose their jobs after hundreds of program cancellations and suspensions in the last year. The Ontario Public Service Employees Union says the cuts amount to, quote, one of the largest mass layoffs in Ontario's history as colleges grapple with funding cuts. Today's Waterloo Region Record is reporting that Conestoga College has cut 1,800 jobs. A report released last week says the federal government's cap on international students has led to a dramatic decline in enrollment and tuition revenue, giving rise to the cancellation or suspension of more than 600 college programs. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning. Today is the day to grab a bite off the barbecue while supporting a great cause. It's the annual Bechtold Barbecue in Petersburg, with all proceeds supporting research into childhood cancer. Warren Bechtold began this fundraiser 21 years ago, has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars over those 2+ decades. You can join us today at 1239 Notre Dame Drive in Petersburg between 11 and 6. I'm going to pop over after the show as well. Maybe flip a burger like Carney flips pancakes. I don't know. But either way, we're going to support Warren and the great barbecue that's happening. Stop by, grab a bite to eat, 1239 Notre Dame Drive in Petersburg. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Thursday morning. Coming up, your morning wake-up call. 10,000 layoffs in the college sector across Ontario. But who's really suffering the most in all of this? Where's the greatest impact? Let's talk about it with your morning wake-up call on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Can we talk about these 10,000 job losses in the provincial college system? The system, according to the Ontario Public Service Employees Union, or OPSU, has been, quote, sabotaged. And we could look at this. I think it's kind of tempting to look at it as a right-sizing, perhaps, of the sector, the industry. And I use the word industry deliberately because we've talked about this before on the show, especially as international student admissions grew at Ontario's colleges and universities, but particularly at Conestoga College, right here in the region of Waterloo, which had more applications and spots for international students than any other college or post-secondary institution in this country by far. Like, it wasn't even close. And really what happened, because as you know, those international students pay up to 4 times as much in tuition as domestic students do. So you take that money and you use it to... I don't think it's an unfair characterization to suggest that Conestoga College built itself a little college empire here with more buildings, more programs, more money coming in. And oh my goodness gracious, with the money being paid, I heard one of the union representatives commenting yesterday that the salaries of college presidents, for example, are greater than the salary for the Prime Minister of Canada. And that's very true. Prime Minister, I believe, makes it somewhere in the $400,000 range, and President John Tibbetts at Conestoga College more than $600,000, including a $140,000 raise that he just received on the last contract. Here's the thing, and this gets right down to the nuts and bolts of it, at least from where I'm sitting. I think what happens here is the students are the ones who end up suffering the most. I'm not trying to diminish the individuals that lose jobs. And just think about it. According to today's reporting in the Waterloo Region Record, 1,800 job losses at Conestoga College. The unions are reporting 10,000 across the province. I don't know if those 1,800 are included in the 10,000, but either way you look at it, you're talking about 20 to 25% of the overall job losses could be coming right out of the Conestoga College system here in our community. But as much as that hurts the individuals and the families affected, what about the students who intended to enroll or who previously had the opportunity to enroll in some of these 600 or so programs that have now been canceled? I mean, isn't the whole idea, don't we generally as communities today want the well-educated, well-trained workforce of tomorrow? And all of a sudden you're canceling or suspending these programs at colleges across this province. Why? Because they don't generate enough revenue. And that seems to me to be a little bit counterintuitive to the idea of what a post-secondary system is supposed to be all about. I don't know that we have to start looking at it as a nonprofit, for example, or a not-for-profit, but something is missing here in the system generally. Either we are underfunding it collectively through our provincial system and not putting enough tax dollars into the post-secondary system, or we have to consider moving to a more Americanized private model where it really is just a for-profit business and the competition gets pretty fierce. But the bottom line in all of this, from where I'm sitting today and I hear about these job losses and the hundreds of programs that get canceled, I'm thinking about the young people that we would like to provide the opportunity to participate in those post-secondary programs. And I don't think it necessarily matters, quite frankly, what discipline it is that you're entering. In a perfect world, sure, you go to school for X and you end up in a field of work in X. But I can tell you that not everybody I went to school with for broadcasting is working in broadcasting today. Not everybody I went to school to get our arts degrees and our teaching certificates is still teaching today. But I believe strongly in the other excellent habits and life skills and the broadening of one's mind that comes with the pursuit of a post-secondary degree or diploma. No matter what it is you're studying, you might go into that field, you might not, but there is value in the process itself. And if hundreds fewer programs are now being offered, I think we really need to take a serious look at the system in general and figure out what it is we want to do with it. Do we want to fund it appropriately so that schools aren't making these decisions because programs don't bring in enough money? Or do we want to privatize and move to a more American-style model? I feel like we're at a crossroads in the system. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Who's really suffering in this whole, is it fair to call it, well, let's not call it a collapse yet, but a restructuring, a reevaluation of the college system? I think the students and we as communities are suffering the greatest impacts here because we want the well-educated workforce of tomorrow, don't we? Let's go to the phones, hear from you on this. Rick, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Mike. How are you?
Good, thanks. And you?
Good, thanks. Yeah, I got to say, I mean, I would support very much going the more the privatization route. And one of the reasons why I say that is because, I mean, all that you have to do is really take a look at, the sunshine list when it comes to the universities and colleges. And when you look at the collective bargaining agreements that are in place, they're just not sustainable. And I think that, there's so many professors out there that are make hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars while downloading a lot of their work to proctors and all sorts of other groups teaching small classes and hardly working. And the reality is that, that's not a sustainable business model. And I really do believe that it's only a matter of time before we do see more colleges and universities going under, because as soon as these guys and ladies have tenure, there's nothing you can do. And you're stuck in this model of gross expenses with limited revenues. And so I think there's a reckoning coming in that world. And I'm curious to see how long it takes before we start to see more colleges and universities go under.
Yeah, Rick, really good points. Appreciate the call because, listen, as I said at the outset of my thoughts on this, it's tempting to look at this as a right sizing of the quote unquote industry. And I think Rick touches on some important points there. At the same time, I wouldn't want this to be some sort of race to the bottom. I do want to pay people well so we get quality educators, but there is a sense, and I think Rick might be onto something here, that there is bloat within the system. Mike, I got about 60 seconds. Good morning to you.
Yeah, Mike. My undergraduate degree is from Laurier. I went to Northwestern in the United States and did my MBA. What I'm kind of concerned about is the hammering of the international students. There was at Northwestern a limit on the number of foreign students, and I was one of them that we could have there, right? But you build international contacts through that. But I think what needs to be happened here, yes, there are some courses that need to be right-sized. There's probably some basket weaving courses that don't need to be taught anymore. And also, I think the Conestoga college stuff is an outlier when you invite 57,000 people into your community and you don't have the infrastructure to support it. That's my thoughts, Mike.
All right, Mike, thanks for that. And indeed an outlier, as I said earlier, head and shoulders above the number of international students accepted to Conestoga College than any other post-secondary institution in the country. So maybe an outlier indeed. Interesting times in the post-secondary sector, particularly colleges. I'm going to get you to the 570 News Center for an update. And then let's talk about that domestic terror plot that involved members of Canada's military. That conversation coming up on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. The RCMP informed us about 48 hours ago that it had broken up a group involved in an alleged, and I will quote, ideologically motivated violent plot that intended to forcibly take possession of land in the Quebec City area. Among the 4 men charged include a couple of active members of the Canadian Armed Forces. Yannick Veilleux-Lepage is an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Economics at the Royal Military College of Canada. Joins us to talk more about it. And obviously, Yannick, with the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, or CAF, involved in this, people's antennae are raised. What was your initial reaction when you heard about the charges in this case?
So there's a couple of things that really caught my attention. First of all, the fact that some of the individuals were serving members in the CAF was quite worrying, but also the scale of the plot. This was the largest arms seizure that I've seen in a terrorist-related plot in Canada. The plot itself involved seizing territory, which is not a new dream, if you will, of extreme right groups, but having that kind of defined and being acted upon was very ambitious. So there was a scale aspect that was worrying. The indictment itself seems to suggest that some of the material that was confiscated was stolen from the CAF or was misappropriated in some fashion. So that was quite worrying as well. So there's several aspects of this story which makes it quite unique and quite different from other cases of utilized service members or other terrorist plots that we've seen in Canada so far.
Is there a lesson here for Canada's military insofar as, any work that it needs to do to weed out extremism, maybe better vet members?
So I think there's a couple of nuances that need to be made here. First of all, is that if you look at the whole of the CAF, you're talking about 60-some thousand reg force, about 20-some thousand reservists. The absolute vast majority of them will serve with integrity, with duty, with courage, and upholding Canadian values. Now, that being said, the CAF has a large institution and kind of a microcosmos of Canadian society, will unfortunately have a minuscule number of individuals that might uphold undemocratic value. This is not a problem that's unique to the CAF. A lot of NATO countries have experienced this. And in our work, we've actually surveyed 11 different NATO countries and how they've addressed extremism within the ranks. And while Canada is not perfect, it is faring much better than a lot of our counterparts. Screening is important, but screening is only useful at detecting individuals who, upon their once they join the CAF. We know that some individuals are radicalized during service, others are radicalized after service. So there needs to be different measures to take that will address the radicalization process at different stage. And I would say that one thing that the CAF could definitely do a bit better relates to the transparency in this process. The Germans, for example, every year, their military intelligence branch releases a report that essentially says this is the number of cases we've had. This was the ideology attached to these cases, because it's not always right-wing extremists. This is the number of cases that were investigated and found that there were basis for them. These were the cases that were groundless. And this is all the remedial actions that we're taking that range from prosecution and imprisonment to additional training. If the CAF did something like this, we'd have a much better idea of the scope of the phenomenon, as opposed to having these incidents that pop up every couple of years and then dominate the media cycle and cause a great deal of reputational harm.
Does the timeline in this investigation concern you in any way? We are led to believe that the activity was first discovered as far back as 2021, a raid in January of 2024, and then 18 months later before any arrests are made in this case.
It doesn't concern me. I have a great deal of trust in the RCMP INSET team, but also in the public prosecution services. These cases are extremely complex. There's a lot of moving parts. And it does take a great deal of time to gather the intelligence, to make sense of the intelligence, to then be able to conduct raids that are going to secure the type of evidence that are necessary, and then later to go on with the charges. So from what I have observed, and again, it's still quite early, there wasn't any immediate danger to the public that would have sparked a quicker action. So sometimes in case of a terrorist plot, for example, in a case like Toronto 18, there was a short timeline in which individuals were getting ready to strike, and that propelled quicker actions. But in a case like this, again, without a great deal of details, sometimes it's best to observe, continue gathering intelligence, build the case, and as long as there isn't an immediate threat to the public, let it play out a bit longer in order to strengthen the cases and the intelligence collection.
I think your point earlier, Yannick, is so well taken regarding the 60,000 or so members of the Canadian Armed Forces, how relative to our global counterparts, these cases of extremism are low in Canada. That said, a story like this obviously becomes unsettling, can shake the faith of some in the Canadian Armed Forces. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think continuing to have these conversations is extremely important. So in the last 10 years or so it's quite interesting. This isn't our first time dealing with this issue. After the Somalia affair, there was a lot of soul-searching about extremism or undemocratic ideas being allowed to fester in the CAF, and a lot of remedial actions were taken. In 1995 in the United States, after the Oklahoma City bombing, which was the deadliest terrorist attack prior to 9/11, there's a great deal of research that came into looking at this notion of insider threat. And then post 9/11, the security focus shifted. And I think what we're seeing now more and more in the last decade or so is a return to a focus on what CSIS calls IMVE, which is ideologically motivated violent extremism. And as part of that, also on this notion of insider threat. So I think that the fact that we are becoming more aware of it, that we are conducting research, that police services and intelligence services are aware of it, that MPs, the military intelligence is aware of this. I think these are all steps in the right direction.
Yannick, really appreciate your time on the show today so we could get this perspective. Thank you for being here.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me.
Yannick Veilleux-Lepage is an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Economics, the Royal Military College of Canada, giving us some perspective on the arrests and charges laid this week in connection to a potentially violent domestic terror plot. I have a number of things in this story catch my attention, not the least of which, of course, is the involvement, the arrest of two members, current members of the Canadian Armed Forces. And we don't have to look back all that far, just a few years now, to a report that suggested to us that extremism was on the rise within the ranks of the Canadian military. The other thing about this, and I take Yannick's point that these sorts of investigations do take time. If there was no imminent threat, the time to build a case, etc. But the investigation dating back to 2023, the activity beginning in 2021, and raids that led to the seizure of explosives and firearms in January of 2024. And here we are about 18 months later, finally making the arrests. That's quite the timeline here. I suppose the good news part of that is the arrests were made. What's your reaction to this story, in particular, the fact that members of the Canadian military stand charged in this case? 519-570-2545, star 570 and 1-800-570-5715. Your calls to come on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
While Canada is not perfect, it is faring much better than a lot of our counterparts. Screening is important, but screening is only useful at detecting individuals who, once they join the CAF. We know that some individuals are radicalized during service, others are radicalized after service. So there needs to be different measures to take that will address the radicalization process at different stage.
Yannick Veilleux-Lepage is an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Economics, the Royal Military College of Canada. Joins us this morning to talk about those four men arrested in connection to an alleged terrorist plot that would involve the seizure of land and form a domestic militia. Two people of the four arrested are current members of the Canadian Armed Forces. 519-570-2545, star 570 and 1-800-570-5715. I know critics will be quick to point out the flaws in the don't let a few bad apples spoil the whole bushel argument, but I think it's fair to bring that to bear in this conversation, isn't it? With tens of thousands of members of the Canadian Armed Forces today, why should we expect that the percentage of those who lean towards extremism would be any different than what we're seeing in the general population of the day? I don't think we should expect it to be any different. And yes, maybe this is a good reminder at how careful we have to be in the process of vetting candidates for the Canadian Armed Forces, et cetera. But again, if you look at the general population and you say extremism appears to be on the rise generally in Canada, generally elsewhere in the world, I don't know why we should expect that members of Canada's military are any different in terms of the percentage of their makeup that may lean towards extremist views. And as Yannick pointed out in that conversation, relative to the rest of the world, we have low numbers attached to these potentially extremist views. The other thing to take away from this is how much transparency could really, and are we getting to the point that the word transparency is being overused, perhaps? But Yannick cited the German model, whereby when issues like this are uncovered, are ferreted out, so to speak, it becomes a very transparent process so that we know that the work is being done to ensure the absolute integrity of our military armed forces. Let's go to the phones. Paul is with us. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, I got a question for you, and I've been watching this, trying to figure it out. They say some sort of a terrorist, extremist, but they're not saying what flavor. They're not saying if they're left wing, right wing.
Does it matter?
It's, the IRA. Maybe it's the Muslims.
But does it matter? Why does it matter?
Because there is a possibility that depending on what flavor it is, there's a possibility that many Canadians might just be leaning to say that, hey, maybe it's not such a bad idea.
So what you're saying makes my point a moment ago, that we generally may be leaning more towards extremism than we have before.
We've been pushed that way by extremists from other countries coming into Canada.
No, stop that.
Maybe it is time for us to stand up for Canadian rights and Canadian policies, Canadian morals.
You missed the point entirely on this one. I will say this much, because Paul almost made my point for me. I think what I was getting at when I talked about the general population having more extremist views, right? Just think of the Freedom Convoy, right? That was an extreme end of our ideology, our political culture, whatever you want to call it. All I'm saying is the extreme edges, either left or right, are getting more oxygen today than they ever have before. And then the more you hear about it, the more you might be inclined to think, I can get behind an idea like that. I still submit to you that it might be a maximum of 20% on the fringes. But if there's 20% on either side, that only leaves 60% of us here in the middle, doesn't it? Either way, the extreme edges are getting more oxygen than ever before, which makes it pretty darn easy to bring people, or makes it much easier to bring people over to your way of thinking. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I have found a glimmer of hope for our new communications center. You know, that $173 million project that regional police are leading to get us ready for next-gen 911, video to 911, all of the things that are coming, not to mention having a dispatch center and communications center that is future-proofed against cyber attacks, against natural disasters, etc. I mean, this is a large undertaking. And as you know, we've talked about it on the show. Regional police have extended the offer to both paramedic services and fire services to join them under the same communications center roof, which on the surface makes good sense to me. Paramedics have willingly engaged in the conversations at this point. Fire services, less enthusiastic at this point. However, according to CTV Kitchener, they're reporting the following comment from Waterloo Fire Chief Rich Heptich, which says later this month, representation from Waterloo Fire Rescue will be attending a workshop hosted by the Waterloo Regional Police Service and a consultant. Our intention is to learn of and explore mid to long-term opportunities, including operational and technological advancements as they pertain to enhancing emergency services communication. In other words, at least Waterloo Fire is willing to entertain the conversation, have the consultant present, take a look at what this might mean for the future of emergency response and a communications center, the likes of which is being built. If nothing else, I would expect the 6 other local fire services to participate in such an effort. Just have the conversation, hear what the consultant has to say, get a closer look at what this might all look like in the future. I am encouraged by this. Good job by you, Waterloo Fire Rescue, at least not closing your door and your mind to the conversation. A good start here, maybe more to come from that. Lots more to come on the show. Right now, it's off to the 570 News Center for an update. And then as we watch the flooding in Texas, what lessons can we take away here? That's coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. We have all, of course, been following the news of the floods in Texas and the tragic outcome. Not to mention the number of conversations leading up to these floods about installing some sort of early warning system and the decision to not do so based on the cost of such a system. Now we realize, of course, that the cost, if you don't have such systems in place, is the loss of life. Catherine Bakos is the Managing Director of Finance and Resilience with the University of Waterloo's Intact Center on Climate Adaptation. Joins us for a conversation. Catherine, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much for making the time to talk about an issue I know that feels far away when we watch what's going on in Texas, but really we live in a flood-prone, some parts of our community are flood-prone as it is. So I wonder from your perspective in the work you do on climate adaptation, if you see lessons here that we could take away from what's happening in Texas.
Yes, of course. And we know here in Canada that we are going to be impacted by warmer and wetter weather. So in regards to precipitation, we're going to have these bigger storms with more water falling over shorter periods of time. But the really good news, and I always like to bring hope into these conversations, Canada's actually in a very good position. We know what to do at the level of homes and communities to reduce these risks. So we are in a very good position here in Canada. What
can we do to reduce those risks?
Of course. Well, at the level of the home, there is a lot that a homeowner can do. Actually, if you go to the Intact Center website, we have really simple resources that any homeowner can use, simple steps around and inside your home that you can take steps to reduce flood risk. So just as a really quick example, cleaning out your eaves troughs, putting window well coverings over window wells, extending downspouts, and installing sump pumps and backwater valves. At the community level, obviously it gets a little bit more technical. Happy to get into that with you as well. But again, we know what to do at the home and community level.
Yeah, what does that look like? Because I think our municipalities should be aware of this. They likely already are, perhaps. But what does it look like at the community level?
Well, first and foremost, we need to ensure that flood risk maps are up to date. So on average across Canada, flood risk maps are 20 to 25 years out of date, meaning we don't actually know where there is risk in the system. So we need to bring those maps up to date so we understand where are we building, where is the greatest risk, so we can actually start putting infrastructure into place to reduce those risks. Once we've identified where the risk is, then we can start putting in what's traditionally called gray infrastructure. So flood control systems and structures, dams, berms, diversion channels, cisterns, holding ponds. We need to complement that traditional gray infrastructure with green infrastructure, wetlands, grasslands, and forested areas. We need, as municipalities, we need to be providing constituents with educational materials on ways that homeowners and renters can reduce risk. And really importantly, and what we saw in Texas, is we need to ensure early warning systems are in place to let people know that to hunker down and stay in place or get to a safe zone.
You kind of read my mind there, Catherine, when you talked about what we see in Texas, early warning systems that need to be in place. And I wonder about that piece of this because we have the benefit of expertise from the Intact Center, for example, an expert such as yourself that can outline what we can do as homeowners and as communities. The big question I now have is, are we doing this?
So, again, the good news is we know what to do. The bad news and where Canada falls short is we are not implementing these resources fast enough. So in regards to early warning systems, we actually saw so we can see what's happening in Texas, but we can actually use examples here in Canada. Last year in Toronto, early warning systems didn't go out in time. The Don Valley Parkway in Toronto was flooded out. People were stuck in traffic for 6 to 8 hours. That's good news. You're stuck in traffic. The worst case scenario is what happened in Nova Scotia in 2023. Early warning systems didn't go out in time, and 4 people passed away. So good news, you're sitting in traffic for a few hours. Bad news is people pass away. So we know what to do. It's just actually getting these resources out to homeowners and major infrastructure projects in the ground to make our communities more resilient.
What is holding us back? Is it a matter of political will? Is it a lack of resources? What might be holding us back from getting to where we need to be?
You know, I often hear that, well, we need another working group. We need to figure out what to do on the ground. And I think what our job is at the Intact Center is to let people know that research has already been done. So is it 100% of what we can be doing? Of course not. But I would prefer 70% of something than 100% of nothing. So part of our job at the Intact Center is to let people know these resources are available, to work with all levels of government, to work with financial institutions. So getting the word out that there's practical, meaningful, and cost-effective ways that we can reduce risk across Canada, and that is being done. There is will at all levels of government. Again, it's just the moving wheel of bureaucracy. It takes a little bit of time, but we do see that momentum growing.
You know, Catherine, you cite the Nova Scotia example from a couple of years ago, last year in Toronto. Now here we are watching what's going on in Texas, further away, yes, but still here we are. And I think the reality here is, and something we have to bear in mind, these incidents are only going to occur with greater frequency in the years ahead.
That is completely correct. And we know that from authoritative bodies that it is going to get hotter and wetter globally. And if you just allow me, what that means in regards to precipitation. So when we have more heat and more moisture in the atmosphere, when water condenses and comes down in the form of precipitation, we end up with bigger storms with more water coming down over shorter periods of time. And the energy that went into evaporating that water in the first place, it doesn't disappear. So that energy stays in the system. So we're going to see these bigger storms going forward. And sadly, they're actually nicknamed. What they're called is water bombs. You have a lot of water falling over shorter periods of time. And our infrastructure, such as our rainwater systems, our homes, and obviously not having early warning systems, we're not prepared for these events. So you're correct. That these events will continue to happen with increasing frequency.
Catherine, really appreciate your time on our show today. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Catherine Backos is a managing director of finance and resilience at the University of Waterloo's Intact Center on Climate Adaptation. We know that these once in 100-year storms are, more likely once in 50-year storms these days. We are seeing these sorts of incidents with increasing frequency, sometimes with tragic results. Nova Scotia, a recent example here in Canada, and of course the dozens of people that have lost their lives in the floods in Texas. We're not all that far removed from the last big water event, flood event here in the region. Remember 2017, just 8 years ago? We were brand spanking new on this show, really. And West Montrose was on the brunt end of a flooded Grand River that flowed over its banks. So we'll talk to someone who was living in West Montrose at the time and what she remembers from that flood of 2017 coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. You remember 8 years ago when the Grand River overflowed its banks and we had some significant flooding here in the region of Waterloo, particularly in West Montrose? Our next guest does because she was living in West Montrose when it all happened. Dee Gao joins the program. Dee, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. How about yourself?
I'm good, thanks.
Good.
Dry today.
Which is good because I'm sure an event the likes of which you experienced in 2017 does not leave your memory very quickly. I saw a picture, and that was your son fishing off the front steps of your house?
Yeah, and that was later. Like the water had receded a bit by then. By the time he couldn't have stepped on those steps if it was the actual day of the flood.
So the water literally up to your front door.
Yeah, basically we had the porch to live on, and that was pretty much it.
Absolutely incredible. What was that time like for you when it comes to the anxiety as the water's coming up higher? Like, how did this all transpire for you?
Well, I mean, the anxiety for sure. It was super scary, and we didn't know. It was the end of June, so I remember very vividly it was like the last week of school. So it wasn't, spring thaw or anything like that, and there was no massive rains. It was issues with the dam up the way. So the water started coming up, and it was a beautiful, hot, sunny day, much like today. And I remember thinking, well, that's weird. Like, it wasn't flood weather or anything like that. And then I went in and went about my business because, stuff like that happens when they let water out of the dam up top of wherever we are, the Shan Dam. I'm not exactly sure what it's called. And then I remember looking out my window and seeing this little wagon. And it was the weirdest feeling, this little wagon that the kids had when they were younger that they used to move rocks around, literally floating out to go underneath the Kissing Bridge. And I was like, what the heck? And I look out, and it was like halfway up the front lawn, which was super rare. That is like spring thaw ice jam kind of levels that we used to get. And then it just kept coming and coming. And again, I knew nothing, heard nothing, saw nothing. All of a sudden, all these cars started coming and closing off the roads to cross the bridge because the flooding on the other side had creeped up even further because it's where our house was situated a little bit up on a hill. And again, we went through that whole situation completely unaware of what was going on. Nobody came and told us anything. We just sat there going, what the heck is happening? It wasn't until the next day that we got a knock on the door, and someone from the GRCA or the region said, oh, yeah, by the way, there's some flooding.
At least they could make it to your front door by that point.
By that point, we sat and spent basically the entire day watching, like, picnic tables and complete metal structure sheds and giant trees floating down the river. But at this time was now roaring. Like the water was basically up to the level of the covered bridge, and things slamming into the bridge, and picnic tables getting stuck in our trees on our property and stuff like that. And we lost power and no septic, obviously, because the water had come up so far, it covered all our septic tanks. And it was really scary and unknown, and not knowing how much farther it was going to come was probably the scariest kind of thing, because there was really nowhere to go and no notice. So nothing, we lost everything that was below the water level. So it was, anxiety is probably the smallest word you could use for it. Mother Nature doesn't mess around.
I noticed, Dee, that a couple of times you made reference to the spring thaw, when I guess something like this might be anticipated, or at least you'd be aware of it. And that just makes me think of when living in West Montrose or anywhere in our community along the Nith, perhaps, you are very aware of the seasonal cycle and what that might mean to the water level.
Absolutely. I've never paid more attention to weather and freeze and thaw than when I lived on the river in West Montrose. And yeah, like in January, February, or you know how some March breaks get really warm and you can have a thaw then, but it doesn't thaw everywhere. So that's when you get the ice jams. And we would have 2-foot thick pieces of ice the size of a big trampoline all, clamor together and fly up on our lawn till they were like stacked, 6 on top of each other and things like that. Then something's coming and you got to be aware, and you make sure that, you do your double check. You make sure that everything that's in your garage, if it's below level or in the basement or anything like that, is in plastic bins or lifted up. I don't know how many water heaters we lost because they got fried from the floods, and you just learn. And, it's scary to think that, these weather situations or weather occurrences are getting worse and worse and more severe. So, people who live on the river, they live with anxiety all the time now, because, again, that was the end of June and there wasn't really any considerable rain to talk of. So it was completely out of the blue.
You mentioned how the warnings or the visits from the Grand River Conservation Authority, for example, seemed to come too late back in 2017. From your experience in that flood, Dee, are there ways that the region of Waterloo needs to improve its early warning systems?
After living, so that was 2017, so we didn't move till 2021. So since then, yes. We would get more emails, possibility of look in the forecast, higher levels in this area, keep an eye, there could be flooding. And they kind of zoned it and put levels of it, of how much flooding we were going to get. I still get those emails to this day, even though I don't live on there, I guess, because I was on the email list. But yeah, it's gotten a lot better. There's actually, at least for me, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone else living on the river. There was more communication afterwards. And it wasn't all of just us looking at the weather going, looks like it's going to rain today, or going to the GRC website to try and find out where the levels were going to be in our neighborhood. So we started actually getting emails and warnings about it, and warnings when the flood warning was gone and things like that. So it did get better in the time that I had spent there after the flood. I'm hoping it's even better than that now.
I really appreciate you making time for the show today, Dee, and sharing the story. Thanks very much for being here.
No problem. You have a great weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Dee Gow used to live in West Montrose, now makes her home elsewhere and enjoys the relative relief that comes with that, because imagine you're living in one of those flood-prone communities. You know where you are when you're in a flood-prone area of our region. I couldn't imagine the anxiety that comes with that. We get enough standing water in our backyard each spring, thank you very much, because there's a bit of a drainage problem in the neighborhood, but nothing the likes of what Dee and other residents of West Montrose went through back in 2017. Imagine the water literally up to your front door. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. We are fast approaching 10:30, your update in the 570 News Center, and then Thursday mornings at 10:30. I know you know what that means. I know Mary knows what that means. Mary is waiting on our phone lines right this second. But Mary, I don't have time to take the call right this second. I'm sorry. Please remember, talk back between noon and 1. We'll have lots more time to have a conversation. Paul called earlier. He is some kind of ticked off with me already. He says he's going to call me back at noon today and call me out. So I can't wait to get torn a new one when that comes around. But you and Mary know that Living Retired comes up Thursday mornings at 10:30. Just remember, the grass is not always greener on the other side. Gary Chalk, Living Retired humor columnist, joins us next on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio.
Ooka chaka, ooka, ooka, ooka chaka, ooka, ooka, ooka chaka, ooka, ooka, ooka chaka, ooka, ooka. I can't stop this feeling deep inside of me. Girl, you just don't realize what you do to me. When you hold me in your arms so tight, you let me know everything's alright. I'm hooked on a feeling.
Oh, it's Thursday morning. I love me some Blue Swede. I really do. And that song indicates that not Ooga Chaka, but Gary Chaka. Gary Chalk is the humor columnist who writes Living Retired. He joins us every Thursday morning at this time to bring the column to life. And I know Mary, who was on the phone a moment ago, anxiously awaits this segment every week. In fact, she called earlier this week just to remind us.
Only 2 more sleeps and I can hear Ooga Chaka, Ooga Chaka. I hope he's listening to know what a devoted fan I am. Oh, I love it.
She loves it, Gary. Mary loves it.
We need more Marys in this world.
I could not possibly agree more. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mike with a mic. How are you?
I am excellent. Mary's on her bike listening to you and me and enjoying another beautiful day.
Oh, my God. Well, Mary and all the other listeners to the Mike Farwell Show, I may be interrupted here probably sooner than later with, the crack interns at the Living Retired headquarters here. They're working on a news story. It's a big news story, Mike, so they're just checking their sources to make sure it's authenticity. So you may have to stand by. I may have an interruption here soon. Anyways.
I understand that. And you know what? Thank you for the hard work that you and the entire team of crack interns puts into this Living Retired show.
Well, we're only doing what we're meant to do, which is live retired. But, man, I'm telling you, it's tough living retired or anything, I guess, for that matter, if you're in the Waterloo region these days. Summertime living's supposed to be easy, but it seems your municipal politicians in Kitchener, Waterloo, they've passed bylaws prohibiting the sale of fireworks, and if that's not bad enough, I don't know whether it's a hot, humid weather or whatever. Now the politicians over in Cambridge, they're also considering a ban on sale of fireworks, and it's all because last year they had a whopping 79 complaints about fireworks.
A whole 79, Gary, imagine.
Yeah, it seems the threshold is rather low. I mean, if you can get 79 complaints, the laws can be changed. It's silly. It makes you wonder what's next.
I hope it's property taxes, because I'll bet you we can find 79 people to complain about that.
Well, that could be. Oops, I've just been handed this news bulletin here, Mike. I've just been given the bulletin. Mike, the crack interns have just been informed that 79 residents in Kitchener's Stanley Park now, they have signed a petition which they're going to submit to Kitchener City Council. They now want to ban Tupperware salad spinners.
No more of those Tupperware salad spinners, Gary.
No, this is a breaking story. It's big, and you may want to get, I don't know, Christine Clark or Mark Douglas. Get them out there now. It's over in the Stanley Park region, and they're trying to gather some more names on their petition for another ban.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Anyways, all this stuff going on during the summer, and you still got to grow your grass. Is your grass surviving all the heat?
Actually, my back lawn does really well. The front lawn less so. But I'm kind of waiting for the heat to win, because I don't want to pull out the lawnmower every week, Gary.
No, exactly. But you're like me, middle-aged men. We can grow enough hair in our ear to get a flock of red-breasted meadowlarks to build a nest, but try to get us to be able to grow grass in the yard. That's a whole other thing altogether.
It's a very good point. Very good point.
I mean, show me a man who doesn't appreciate red fescue or bluegrass, Bermuda grass, even bent grass, as long as it's on a golf course.
Where it belongs, Gary.
Exactly.
Yes.
Trying to grow grass at home, it's impossible. It's sort of like telling Trump he can't use Twitter. It's not going to happen. On the other hand, women, they figure it can't be too much to ask for their front lawn to look like the photoshopped pictures that you see on fertilizer bags. And just the other day, Jan said to me, Gary, are you going to do something about this terrible-looking lawn we have this year? She said she doesn't want our neighbors to read about us on the front cover of God-Awful Gardener.
You got me thinking about the photoshopped pictures on the front of the fertilizer bags. Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if we could just apply a filter to our yard so that when people drove by, they saw it only through the filter? That'd be great.
Hey, you're onto something there, Mike, which leads me to the Living Retired 9-step program to wasting your time trying to grow grass.
I love when we get this important advice for Living Retired. Okay.
Right. Okay. So now this one, you have to know the 9-step program to wasting your time trying to grow grass. It does come complete with a conditional, ironclad 3-part guarantee. We promise that 1, your lawn may look somewhat greenish. 2, your wife may be somewhat pleased. And 3, the neighborhood dogs will continue to poop on your lawn. It's all part of the program.
As long as you pick up, I'll let your dog poop on my lawn. That's fine.
Okay, so if you got a pen and paper, let's go through. I think you're going to jot some of these down.
Okay.
Step 1, tools. They always say any project, you got to have the right tools. And it's the same when you're trying to grow grass. what you need to get started are a couple of things. A lightweight wheelbarrow, and that's because as we're aging, we want a nice light wheelbarrow. Makes it easier to push things around. Unfortunately, the lightweight wheelbarrow is guaranteed to collapse once you toss a bag of grass seed or dirt into it. So that's the one thing you need.
Okay.
And then you need a garden hose that leaks. They're readily available. They're everywhere. And the third thing for the tool is you need a hoe. Preferably it should be a lightweight hoe so you can throw it further in a fit of anger when you actually step on it.
You mean like my 9-iron, Gary?
That's right. You get the drift.
Yeah.
Now, you don't need to spend too much money on those things because garden tools are like a salad spinner. You use them once. Then, this is the second step, you have to prepare the soil. If you ever hear about master gardeners, who incidentally, master gardeners are people who figure it's too much physical work to actually garden, so instead they write about it in the newspaper every week. Right?
I read that column.
That's right. Well, the master gardeners will tell you that good soil will equal good grass. I'm here to tell you from the Living Retired headquarters that that's a load of sheep manure. Because turning the soil with a spade, it's hard work. It can lead to back problems. And since we're retirees now, we don't have benefits, so we have no reason to develop a mysterious back problem that will keep us off the job for a month or two.
You had me nervous at sheep manure, Gary. I'm not going to lie. I'm glad it came. It's a load of sheep manure. Okay.
Yes. I had to watch that one. Next one, you have step 3. You ever aerated your lawn?
Oh, I love the aeration.
Do you?
I do.
Oh, my gosh, I did it once. It ended up, well, it was a muddy barnyard. That's what I ended up. And of course, I did it myself. What I did was I ended up with this, well, all the grass was upside down. So I tried to sell it to Jan that now with the grass roots firmly facing up, it would mean the grass would grow further and better.
Sure.
That was my theory.
Yeah, okay. Makes sense. I can get behind that theory.
Well, Jan couldn't. Step 4 in the Living Retired 9-step program to wasting your time trying to grow grass is you have to spread the grass seed. A couple of choices here. You can use those 2-wheel spreaders that you walk behind. They're the type that always tip over and dump a load of fertilizer and create a great big brown spot on your grass. Or you can use the more convenient, those little small handheld devices. Their official name is a whirlybird thingamajig. And you walk around, and you'll get the same outcome with whichever tool you use because most of the grass seed will end up in your wife's flower beds.
Of course it will.
Right.
Yeah.
And just one more here quickly before we go to break. First rule of gardening is step number 5. And the first rule of gardening is that grass seed sometimes grows, and there's other grass seed that doesn't grow. And it sort of comes out this way. The grass seed that doesn't grow is the grass seed that you spread throughout your yard, and you fertilizer, you water regularly, you're constantly looking at. That will never grow. But in fact, the grass seed that will definitely grow is that grass seed that spilled over into your wife's flower beds. That will grow.
Right along with the flowers, the grass will grow, says Gary Chalk, as we talk about the Living Retired 9-step program to wasting your time trying to grow grass. The conversation continues on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I want you in your mind's ear, please, to instead pretend that you're listening to Tom Jones and the green, green grass of home as we continue Living Retired with Gary Chalk this morning and the 9-step program to wasting your time trying to grow grass. Perhaps you and I should try to sing Tom Jones together, Gary.
Oh, you don't want to do that.
Exactly.
That's a thought. Well, you just don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. So let's continue. We have a few more steps of the Living Retired 9-step program to wasting your time trying to grow grass. This is, I think we're on step number 6. Yes,
yeah.
Step number 6. Very important whenever you're trying to grow grass. It's the fertilizer. You gotta fertilize. And we have concluded here that there's nothing tricky about deciding when to fertilize. Just don't fertilize. That's the best thing we could advise. I discovered this, Mike, myself. Purchasing large bags of fertilizer. They're designed by advertising agencies who employ professional photographers, who employ graphic artists, who have expensive computer programs that produce award-winning photographs of lawns that don't exist. It's right on the bag. So what my suggestion is for step number 6, if you insist on buying fertilizer, cut the pretty pictures off the bags and sort of arrange them out on your front lawn.
See, there you go. It's like the filter I talked about earlier.
That's what I was thinking about. You were
perfect.
reading my mind. I could tell. So that brings us around another very important step. This is, well, everybody talks about this, when to water. Unfortunately, this is where the municipal politicians have gotten in on the act. You know, they can say we can water on even-numbered days or odd-numbered days. It's just, so the bottom line, there's nothing tricky about deciding when to water either. Don't.
I agree with that one, just for the record. Just don't water it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, the first few times you water, everybody experiences this, the grass seed gets carried away by small streams of water that will collect at the lowest point in your property. That's just a gardening rule. And that means that probably about a month later, you'll be the proud owner of a vast, barren, desert-like yard, except for a little small 2-foot patch that will be out at the curb. It will be green.
Yeah, it's downstream.
Yeah, that's it. So, which is another thing we investigated, and there's not conclusive proof that you should hope that it's your neighbor who seeds his front lawn and waters it, so it comes downstream to the curb by your place.
There you go.
Yeah. So, anyways, and then we're step 9, which is when to apply weed killer. Once again, this is where our municipal politicians have gotten into the act. And, well, so the conclusion that we've come to is when to apply weed killer, in one word, overnight.
And after you've had a friend visit Quebec or New York State.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be caught by the lawn police for trying to control the weeds in your lawn.
Sure.
So the municipalities figure, and this is what they've decided, homeowners should not apply toxic chemicals on their lawn. Instead, they give that permission to golf courses, which is where everyone walks on chemically treated lawns for 4 hours, about 3 or 4 times a week, all summer long. It's all right to put that chemical treatment on the golf course, but not on your home.
It makes perfect sense, just like every bylaw, Gary.
I think the heat's getting to you now, Mike. Which brings us around to step 9 in the Living Retired 9-step program to wasting your time trying to grow grass, which is there will come a time that you have to admit to your wife you don't know squat about growing grass. Right? You know, like you know, your wife, if she's like Jan, she'll probably come to the point she'll say, "You're a gardening moron." And this will happen maybe a month, 6 weeks after you planted the grass seed. And that's because your backyard is it's a forlorn field of dirt clumps interspersed with little frail-looking blades of grass sticking up. Your hoe is impaled in the cedar fence you hurled when you tripped and whacked yourself in the head. The hose is leaking. The wheelbarrow's broken. And that's when your wife's words will say, "I just don't know why I put up with this."
Because it gets you out of the house, Gary.
Oh, I guess that's what it is.
It's gotta be.
That's what it is. But anyways, there are a few adages, 3 that come to mind to me, Mike, about growing grass. There's you've probably heard this one. The grass is always greener on the other side, right?
Of course it is.
Yeah, but the other side means your neighbor's house across the street. That's always greener than ours.
It is.
Jan always says, Gary, if Murray can do it, why can't you? If John can do it, why can't you? If Lyle can do it, why can't you? Well, she's looking at the wrong lawns, obviously. And then there's the other one. You've heard this one, I'm sure. You can hear the grass growing under your feet. You ever heard that?
I can hear it. But it doesn't grow, so I don't hear anything.
Well, if you're like me and you're living and retired, the only way I can hear it if I purchase some of those expensive Bluetooth-connected hearing aids.
I like it.
Then I can hear the grass.
It's perfect.
And, of course, the classic one is the famous book. I love Derma Bombeck. She wrote the book, The Grass is Always Greener Over the Septic Tank.
Absolutely true.
Oh, it's just amazing. Well, hey, Mike, I've just been handed I got another news bulletin here, the Living Retired World Headquarters. Okay, we've just been informed now, in addition to the petition signed by 79 residents in Kitchener's Stanley Park neighborhood to go to City Hall in Kitchener to get Tupperware salad spinners banned, there's now the people over at Forest Heights, they're getting on the act, and they have a petition there. They've got, 79 names, and they're now trying to ban decorator pillows.
That's music to your ears, Gary.
I love me decorator pillows when they're out on the street going to the garbage dump.
Looking forward to next week already. Thanks for being here.
Have a good one, Mike. Bye now. Bye, Mary.
Gary Chalk writes the humor column Living Retired. Don't forget to look it up online, livingretired.press. While you're there, sign up for the weekly newsletter. That column delivered directly to your inbox, livingretired.press. Gary Chalk joins us every Thursday morning at 10:30 here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith announcing earlier this week a partnership that will break down some interprovincial trade barriers. This is a very good thing, right? But are the words really worth much before the actions take place? And how difficult is it to get those actions into motion? We can talk all we want about breaking down those barriers. How difficult is it in practice? We talk about that next on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio.
This is where today's topics turn into today's talking points. It's local and it's Democratic radio at its finest. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio.
In the face of uncertainty, Canadians are coming together to stand up for our country and build a stronger, more united Canada. That's why just a few weeks ago, Premier Smith and I were in Saskatoon to sign a historic agreement to unlock free trade between Alberta and Ontario. Over the last few months, Ontario has signed agreements with a total of 6 provinces to support free trade across Canada. We're doing this because we need to unlock the full potential of our economy.
The Mike Farwell Show continues
on 570 News Radio.
That, of course, is Ontario Premier Doug Ford at a media conference earlier this week alongside Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. The two Canadian premiers will break down some interprovincial trade barriers, open up a pipeline project, a rail line to the Ring of Fire. Very good things, part of a broader conversation we've been having about breaking down these interprovincial trade barriers. Dia Zhang is a lecturer at McGill University and a researcher in the politics of international trade and protectionism. Joins us to talk more about it. And Dia, I wonder, with all of this talk about breaking down interprovincial trade barriers, it starts with Prime Minister Mark Carney. We just heard it here between Doug Ford and Danielle Smith earlier this week. We keep talking about it, but is breaking down these barriers actually easier said than it is done?
So, yeah, first of all, I think from all of us who actually have been keeping an eye on internal trade, this is great news that there's momentum, that people are talking about it. But you're absolutely right. There are actually a lot of things to be done before, removing internal trade barrier can actually be achieved. For example, at the very base, what does internal trade barrier actually mean, right? There are different regulatory standards, but really a lot of it has to do with the lack of infrastructure, the vast geography Canada is. So these barriers are very, very hard to tackle.
So that lack of infrastructure, if we had the infrastructure, for example, high-speed rail, would that make breaking down the trade barriers easier?
Yes, so absolutely. I think infrastructure is actually a fundamental problem. It's a very natural, internal trade barrier that exists just because Canada is very, very big, and our population are kind of concentrated in different part of the provinces, different part of the territories. So having that infrastructure, whether it's fast railway speed or freight trains or even just kind of pipelines, all of these would facilitate the process of trading, and it would also help to grow demand. Overall, there is a positive impact on our economy in general.
So we know, for example, Dia, that the province of Ontario made a pretty big deal of the announcement that it was removing its registered exemptions to the Canada Free Trade Agreement. Isn't that a good thing?
So yes, so absolutely, this shows a great momentum, and I do think Ontario is on the forefront on this end. However, there is a caveat to that. So the exemptions are removed, yes, but reciprocity is a big thing here. So a lot of the removal of the trade barrier that Ontario currently has really relies on the other provinces also doing the same. So, for example, alcohol restrictions, right? That relies on reciprocity. We need to have provinces like Quebec and BC also removing their alcohol sale barrier to be able to actually achieve anything. So there's a lot of process that involves intergovernmental collaborations, and that's bilateral, but that's also multilateral in the perspective.
What can we learn from Nova Scotia, for example, which earlier this year introduced new legislation that was meant to reduce existing interprovincial trade barriers?
So yes, so the Nova Scotia case was quite unfortunate, I would say. So they really wanted to remove internal trade barrier, and there was a lot of momentum in that. However, the decision was, I would say, made too fast in the sense that a lot of the regulatory parties were not really they were really not consulted, and they had to end up rolling back some of these removal of barriers. So I think that just shows that really this is not kind of a one-size-fits-all scenario. A lot of parties are involved. The government also need to consultate with industry leaders to decide on what kind of regulation is actually needed in the province, and what kind of mutual recognition kind of framework that we can actually adopt across the provinces.
So when we talk about trade liberalization, what makes it so complicated and technical? It sounds good on the surface, but what are those sorts of nuts and bolts that make it more difficult?
So I think it's really interesting because a lot of people talk about internal trade, interprovincial trade, on kind of the same level as international trade, right? Talking about trade liberalization, thinking about it's just about signing agreements. However, there are a lot of hoops to jump really within Canada. Internal trade has an inner layer of complexity. This has to do with, for example, provincial autonomy. Different provinces have different needs. We are geographically very different. The markets are different. So the provinces are in charge of making their own laws. And there's also overlapping jurisdiction between the provinces and the federal government, adding another layer of freeing trade within Canada. And on top of that, the industry leaders are also involved in these decision-making. So all of these together needs to kind of come together. They're kind of different pieces of the puzzle to come together to have this one way that's mutually recognized to remove barriers to regulations and also removing the barriers to geography. So there are many pieces to this puzzle.
How much influence can a prime minister have in all of this? Because we know that Mark Carney made a pretty big deal out of the idea that he'd have interprovincial trade barriers broken down by July the 1st.
So I do think from kind of a signaling perspective, it has been great that he's motivating different provinces to come together and talk about it, and removing the federal level of barrier does kind of help to a certain extent. However, I do want to emphasize that a lot of the regulatory standards, right, which are currently one of the biggest internal trade barrier, are completely the jurisdiction of provinces. So really this rests at the hand of provincial premiers to come together, reach deals with each other, and beyond that, there's really very little the federal government can do.
So we just saw this week Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith talking about energy projects, pipelines, rail infrastructure. Are you encouraged by that, Dia?
So I think that's a very encouraging sign, even though it's very much, within the energy sector, which makes sense. It's a strategic alliance, as we call it. But I do think it's a great sign because it kind of points to, the lack of infrastructure, even though currently it's building for pipeline, they're building ports, they're building railways, but these can potentially be used later on for trading other goods. And it also gives a great example of how things can be done. However, with the caveat that currently this is a non-binding deal, so there are a lot of more uncertainties, especially kind of the environmental impact and how it affects Indigenous groups. So we have to keep in mind that to really reach that, there's still a long way to go.
It is a very interesting conversation. Dia, thank you very much for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Dia Zhang is a lecturer at McGill University and a researcher in the politics of international trade and protectionism. Easier said than done. That would be the simple way of summing up this idea of breaking down interprovincial trade barriers. Remember that Prime Minister Carney pledged to have the framework of that in place by Canada Day. But when you get into the nuts and bolts of this, you find out that really most of these barriers have, at least in theory, been broken down. It's how complex it becomes when you begin to unpack all of the various details. Nova Scotia, not too long ago, announcing a significant step forward in accepting out-of-province credentials on trades, etc. It's met with great fanfare, and then very quietly, several weeks later, most of those changes are walked back, and it remains as difficult as ever to get licensed to work in Nova Scotia. So I worry a little bit that this is a commitment that will be difficult for the Prime Minister to keep and for our provinces to follow through on. Some great talk from Premier Ford and Premier Smith earlier this week, but what kind of action does it meaningfully lead to? What are your thoughts on breaking down these barriers? Is this a path forward? 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
The provinces are in charge of making their own laws, and there's also overlapping jurisdiction between the provinces and the federal government, adding another layer of fraying trade within Canada. And on top of that, the industry leaders are also involved in these decision-making, also removing the barriers to geography. So there are many pieces to this puzzle.
Oh, something in that clip really caught my attention. That's Dia Zhang, lecturer at McGill University, a researcher in the politics of international trade and protectionism, talking about how it's easier said than done when it comes to breaking down interprovincial trade barriers. And you heard in that clip there's sometimes overlapping regulation between the federal government and the provincial governments. And this, to me, is part of the larger conversation around this idea of breaking down interprovincial trade barriers. This is something that Prime Minister Carney talked about during the campaign, is working towards right now since he's taken office. And it sounds great in theory. Why shouldn't we have a freer movement of goods between provinces, alcohol, pipelines, etc., you name it? But it gets a whole lot more complicated when you begin to break it down. And this is something, if we can unlock the complexities of it and actually get to true interprovincial trade, removal of these barriers, and a stimulation of the economy. This is part of the broader conversation I see anyway, around what Prime Minister Carney is intending to do when it comes to the budget and our economy. We told you earlier this week about the 15% reduction in departmental budgets in the next 3 years. It starts at 7.5% for next year, 10% the year following, 15% the year after that. I don't think it's cumulative. I think that within 3 years, basically, you're looking at a 15% reduction in departmental budgets. Now, I'll grant you that you should take that with the grain of salt that reminds you that there is also increased spending planned in these next many years. So you can reduce 15% of those budgets now, but there is still a plan to spend more money. So overall, what the savings look like in real numbers, I'm not certain. But something else, and we talked about it in the Farwell Show 5 just this morning at the beginning of the show, a new review that aims to cut red tape across the public service. A review cabinet ministers are being asked to undertake of regulations within their portfolios. And as they undertake this review, the idea is to remove outdated rules and reduce duplication with the provinces. And that's something we just heard from Dia Zhang in that clip, where sometimes you've got overlapping regulations between the feds and the provincial governments. So can we remove those overlapping regulations where clearly they would not appear to be necessary? If we are to successfully increase spending for the military, for example, which is something significant that has already been pledged by Prime Minister Mark Carney, and reduce these budgets and review all of these regulations, etc., a key part of all of this will not only be finding the money through cuts and or savings, but also growing the economy. And that's where breaking down interprovincial trade will be, dare I say, critical for the Prime Minister to accomplish so that the economy has a chance to grow, thereby generating more revenue for the federal government. So yes, there will be cuts, there will be savings searched for as per what the Prime Minister has asked of the various federal departments. At the same time, if you're growing the economy, you're helping achieve those spending goals as well. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Is it just me, or is this week flying by? It's Thursday already, right? I don't have my calendar out of sorts here. Already Thursday. So I'm just thinking ahead to tomorrow's show. Fridays are always fun days, especially in the summer here on the show. We'll have your not $1 million question to start the show, which is just a little bit of fun that we have on Friday mornings. And you know you do not win $1 million for answering the question. I once called it the $1 million question, and somebody asked, thank goodness they didn't get the right answer, but do I get $1 million if I'm right? No, I can't give you money. But we can have some fun trying to answer our not $1 million question on the show. Fridays also mean all requests. So the music that you hear when we're coming back from commercial breaks, we like to give you the choice of song to hear, a little bit of one of your favorites or just something you're in the mood for. And tomorrow we've attached a theme to it. So start thinking of your favorite songs from movie soundtracks and let us know what you'd like to hear on the All Request Friday tomorrow. You can request your song by sending me an email, mike@570news.com, or when you call into the station to talk about one of the issues of the day or anything else, just let Jen know on the other side of the glass what song you'd like to hear tomorrow. We'll play it for you as long as it comes from a movie soundtrack. So that's looking ahead to our show tomorrow. Our Friday 4 Roundtable will be here discussing the week's big stories as well. Right now, I'm going to get you to the 570 News Center for an update. And then on Thursday mornings at 11:30, we have a little bit of fun with something we call the Flipside. It's a break from the heavier stuff. And this is about as big a break you can get. Give someone a Kit Kat, give them a break. A Kit Kat chocolate bar, you mean? Apparently, Jersey milk is no longer. The Canadian company that produced the Jersey Milk chocolate bar has discontinued the bar. It just wasn't profitable enough anymore. And so we remember Jersey Milk and our favorite chocolate bars, either past or present, on the flip side. Let's talk chocolate. This is 570 News Radio. So the deal is this. Mondelez Canada says it is discontinuing the Jersey Milk chocolate bar. To which I ask the perfectly logical question, I think, who needs a Jersey Milk when you can get a Dairy Milk? Like, you would choose the Dairy Milk by Cadbury every day and twice on Sundays over the Jersey Milk by Nielsen, wouldn't you? Anyway, it's the end of a chocolate bar era, and many are bemoaning the loss of another Canadian-made chocolatey treat. You know me. I've never met a food item with sugar in it that I did not want to consume, and consume in great quantity. I must admit, though, I'm exactly like Matthew, who commented on our Facebook page today. I posted this earlier to begin soliciting some responses before the show. You can always follow the Facebook page, facebook.com/The Mike Farwell Show. But Matthew pointed out the only time he recalls having a Jersey Milk is when he got one in his Halloween trick-or-treat bag. I'm probably in the same boat. Many of you saying on our Facebook page today that Jersey Milk made for the best s'mores ingredients. Not bad, but I hate to break it to you, and I know it's American, but I was partial to Hershey milk chocolate when it came to making the s'mores. Nonetheless, in the wake of the loss of the Jersey Milk, a really simple question for you today on the flip side. What is your go-to chocolate bar? Simple as that. And you know what? It can be past or present if you want. But I mean, it's hard to be your go-to if it's no longer here. But maybe you want to reminisce about a chocolate bar of days gone by. With the Jersey Milk gone, where will you turn to satisfy your sweet tooth? 519-570-2545. Star 570 and 1-800-570-5715. I come at a conversation like this from a place of deep experience. I think I have told you before. If I haven't or you didn't hear it then, I will confess to using the entirety of the money that was granted me by way of allowance. $2. I could go to the store, and this is back in the day when there were corner stores in our neighborhoods. So it was literally around the corner from my house, half a block away on the next corner was the store that I would go on my lunch break. And with $2, I could buy 4 chocolate bars. And you know what? I did. And I would take those 4 chocolate bars with me back to school that afternoon, and I would consume them all. 4. Always different, of course, but I remember so many different chocolate bars. And for whatever reason, when I think back on my 4 chocolate bar a day habit, Bubbles is a chocolate bar that stands out to me. Long since gone. It kind of had wafers in it. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I just use that by way of explaining to you. It's like my chocolate bar eating resume. There's my experience. 4 chocolate bars in one sitting. Over the years, I have gone back and forth on my favorites. Mr. Big was a favorite for a long time, especially when they had, do you remember the contest with Wayne Gretzky's point totals? You would unwrap the Mr. Big bar, and inside would be a random number. And if that number matched Wayne Gretzky's points that particular year, you would win some kind of prize. I remember that. I remember the Charleston Chew. That was kind of a nougaty chocolate-covered bar and kind of chewy, hence the name Charleston Chew. But even the package recommended that if you freeze it and then break it into bits, oh my goodness gracious, that was a step up. So again, over the years, I've gone back and forth with my favorites. Wonder Bar has ranked up there pretty close to the top recently. So has the Kit Kat Chunky. And one of you on our Facebook page were exactly the same. The Kit Kat, but take it out of the fridge first. Like put it in the fridge for a while, eat the Kit Kat out of the fridge. Exquisite. Just exquisite. For me right now, though, It's the Crunchy Bar. The good old sponge toffee covered in chocolate. There's another Cadbury, just like the dairy milk. I love me a Crunchy Bar, and that is absolutely my number one go-to right now when it comes to chocolate bars. No offense, Mondelez Canada, but I'm not even going to miss the Jersey milk because I never ate it. I would pass right by it. Seemed a little bit boring to me. By the way, anybody that decides that they would like to have a Big Turk chocolate bar gets put into candy bar prison. I'm going to go American style on you here. Forget it. If you want good Turkish delight, go to the Crushed Almond Cafe in Kitchener, little neighborhood cafe. They make some of the best, like, real life Turkish treats. Get your Turkish delight there. Don't try this goofy Big Turk chocolate bar. I don't like that one, or anything with coconut in it. Can go fly a kite or pound some coconut. Don't want any of that. But if I'm going to be asked for my favorite one, it's going to be that Crunchy Bar, followed closely by the Kit Kat Chunky. Not so much the 4-finger Kit Kat. I want the Chunky, please and thank you. And then the Wonder Bar. Death row meal, I would like each of those bars before you finish me off, okay? Your go-to, now that the Jersey milk is gone, will you miss it? What can you possibly replace it with? 519-570-2545. Star 570 and 1-800-570-5715. Richard, good morning.
Well, good morning, Mike. I want to tell you I'm right there with you with the Crunchy, but I'll tell you my second is the Big Turk, and if I have to go to jail, so be it.
Richard, what are you doing? Why do you want that? It's terrible. Oh, my goodness. Oh,
I don't know. I childhood memories. What can I say?
I am amazed at how many people love that bar.
It is. Well, you know, it brings back fond memories.
Okay.
The other thing I want to just say about Hershey.
Yes.
Because Hershey's makes excellent chocolate. So we toured the Hershey plant in Hershey, Pennsylvania, my children and I. And they told us there that they are the only chocolate company in North America still using a percentage of cream, real cream, to make their chocolate. And that's why your Hershey and your Reese's and all of that chocolate is so smooth. They're still using real cream, not a powdered, not a manufactured product.
I am glad to know that. See, I always wondered, and I felt a little bit unpatriotic when I would choose the Hershey over the Nielsen Jersey milk, but I like me a good old Hershey bar. Maybe that's why.
Yep. And I think there is, if you put it beside any of the other chocolates, it's smoother. It's a nice chocolate for that quality of chocolate bar.
You are a man of exquisite taste, Richard. Thanks for this.
Thank you, Mike.
Enjoy your day. Bye-bye. So we're there together. If there's one Crunchy Bar sitting on the counter, Richard and I are going to be reaching for it quickly. But if there's a Crunchy and a Big Turk, I win, right? Because he'll gladly take the Big Turk as his second choice, and I can have the Crunchy. I do not understand this desire for the Big Turk chocolate bar. I just don't get it. But hey, you do you. The Jersey milk is gone. Andre, what's going to replace it?
It doesn't matter, replacement, because there's so many out there.
I know. That's the thing, right?
Add it up. But I remember when I was a ski monitor and did the Red Cross going up the chairlift. My favorite years ago was Crunchy until sorry. I know you don't like that, but so going up the chairlift. And then I met my wife, and she told me, she goes...
okay, wait. Now, Andre, you're going in a million directions here.
Okay.
You're going up a chairlift. You met your wife at the top of the ski hill? Is that what you're telling me?
No. Sorry. It's just, yeah, that was my addiction. It's going up. I can eat 10 of them in one day back in those days.
Crunchies.
That was the past.
The Crunchy Bar.
And I met my wife. I became smarter because of her. And she told me, well, while you're eating Crunchy, there's hardly no chocolate. And I was like, okay. And then she got me addicted to Whole Henry peanut butter and Reese's peanut butter. And it's just, you cannot go nowhere else but those ones, I think. So it doesn't matter about the other ones.
All right, Andre. Thanks for that. The O. Henry peanut butter, Christine Clark, who does All News Mornings with Mark Douglas. I talked to her about this earlier today before the show. She also said the O. Henry was her favorite. And I said to her, and I would add this to what Andre's talking about, you can almost get away with that being, quote unquote, healthy. Peanut butter, right? There are some redeeming qualities there with the good fats and the protein. The O. Henry bar with all those peanuts in it. Nothing wrong with some peanuts and a little bit of chocolate on top of them. But, peanuts, good source of protein, good source of healthy fat. You could almost get away with it. I disagree, though, on not enough chocolate on the Crunchy bar. I don't know. I think they put a good layer on there, which also reminds me of the times when Twix became my favorite bar. Again, deep experience here, okay? I've gone from one favorite bar to another favorite bar to many other favorite bars over my lifetime. I'm a little bit of a mercenary when it comes to my choice and favorite chocolate bar. But when Twix was my go-to, I learned a way of just kind of nibbling around the edges and then peeling with my teeth the top off the cookie part. So you'd get just the chocolate and the caramel. And oh my, did I enjoy that. And then the cookie wafer with a little bit of chocolate on the bottom also wasn't too bad. Good amount of chocolate on there if you know how to eat it. I say the same thing about the Crunchy. Grant, what about you? Go-to chocolate bar now that Jersey Milk is gone.
I could care less.
Well, in that case, Grant, that you don't participate today. If you could not care less, then why are you even calling me? I'll go to Greg instead. Sorry, Grant. You can call back later. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Mike.
I'm just having some fun at Grant's expense today.
Oh, fine by me.
Okay.
But, you contradicted yourself.
How so?
When you started talking about this, you mentioned something to the extent about, anything sugary, or you never argue with, whatever, and then eventually I thought, hang on. At that point, I was thinking, hang on, is Big Turk going to cut it for you? Because that's...
Oh, okay, it's got sugar. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Good point.
That's the thing. But again, obviously I've been listening in the past to even know that. But Three Musketeers rules.
Oh, now that, you know what? That's a good bar. Okay.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I used to look for that one. And then one time a good friend at Halloween time bought me a bag of 50 trick-or-treat size ones. And it's like, wow. Okay, I got to try to spread these out, but that didn't work too well.
Of course not. You never can spread them out. I was going to say, how long did they last?
I don't know, bite size, like 10 a day or whatever. But, that one, I haven't... There's not many I argue with, but at the same time, that one I think would rule for me. And then sort of malted milk, kind of a similar kind of thing with some... But do they even make that? I can't tell you. I've had one in years.
I don't think they do, but I remember that one as well. Yeah. Sweet Marie. I don't think they make the Sweet Marie anymore either, do they?
You could probably be right, but I have no clue because I can't remember exactly what was in that one.
That's kind of a Mr. Big knockoff.
Okay. Yeah. No, I guess I can eat the ones with the nuts in, but just anything like nougat and chocolate, you got me there.
All right, Greg, appreciate it. Three Musketeers gets a vote. Kit Kat Chunky's up there. The Crunchy is doing pretty well. With Jersey Milk gone, what is your go-to chocolate bar? If you ever even ate the Jersey. That's why it's gone. Nobody's buying the ding-dang thing. This is the Flip Side on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. The Flip Side is our chance to take a break from the heavier stuff, have a little bit of fun, and today it's at the expense of chocolate bars. Jersey Milk no longer being made. Canadian produced being discontinued. Just wasn't profitable enough. So the simple question is, in the absence of Jersey Milk, where will you go to fulfill that chocolate bar craving? What's your go-to? 519-570-2545. Star 570. 1-800-570-5715. Lori, good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
What's your favorite?
Come on, the Wig Wag. Do you remember that one?
Oh, my gosh.
Okay, I'm dating myself, but I'm thinking Montreal. Oh, God, I love that bar because it was a long bar.
Yep.
And it took a long time to eat, and kind of similar to your Crunchy, same idea. Takes a while with the toffee, but now I'm jonesing. Like, that was a good one.
It was a chewier one, wasn't it? Or was it crunchy?
No, chewier.
Chewy, yeah, that's what I thought.
It had like a toffee with the chocolate. And I have to agree with you with the Crunchy. There's just the right amount of chocolate.
I think so.
But you can dip that in your coffee. You can have that with Bailey's by the fire.
Wait a minute.
I'm all about it.
I think you just changed my life. Dip your crunchy in your coffee, Lori. I never thought of that.
You see? You got to hang around with the right people, Mike.
I'm so glad you called because I'm 100% trying that. Thank you.
All right. Well, great topic. A lot of fun to listen to it.
Thanks, Lori. Appreciate it. Having a lot of fun talking about it, too. The Jersey milk is gone, but surely we can fill our cravings in other ways, right? Ron, what about you? Go-to chocolate bar.
Well, I would have to say it's not a chocolate bar that you see a lot of.
Okay.
But it's the Kit Kat matcha.
The Kit Kat matcha. So like a matcha, like a green tea thing? Is that what that is? Or
Yeah, it is. It's
Okay.
a Japanese. It's actually Kit Kat is very famous in Japan. They have millions of different Kit Kats.
It's so funny you say this because my buddy Chuck, I don't know where he gets these things. He travels a lot for work and he's constantly posting on his Instagram about these weird, to me, Kit Kat chocolates. And I don't know, like, I just want the Kit Kat chunky, but yeah, I've seen all these wacky flavors from him.
Well, they also have another one that's kind of interesting. 70% cocoa Kit Kat.
Really?
Yeah.
So where now? Because I haven't seen any of these around here. Where would you get a Kit Kat matcha bar?
Well, actually, you can find them at. I've seen the ones at TNT.
Okay.
But usually, I go down to Richmond Hill, and I'll hit Japantown, which is a little bit of like a little mall up there.
Right.
And I can get it there, or I'll go down to the Pacific Mall and get them.
I'll be darned. Wow. Okay. I might have to try one of these days. Thanks, Ron.
No problem.
All
Have a
right.
good one.
Enjoy your day. The Kit Kat matcha bar. Who knew? Wendy, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. When I was younger, many years ago, there was a chocolate bar called Picnic, and it had nuts, and I just loved it. And nowadays, you can only find it at the British stores.
Oh,
It was
okay.
one of those British ones. And I lived in a British colony, so that's how we used to get it. But now I have to settle for any kind of Cadbury, especially the fruits and nuts one.
Oh,
I
yes.
could sit and eat tons of the fruits and nuts one. And my cousin goes to England, and she brings me back the 8-inch ones, and I get to eat it all by myself because nobody else in my family likes it. So that's okay.
That's the best kind to have at home because then it's all for you.
Exactly. Anyway, you have a great day.
Thanks, Wendy. You too. There's a good little British store. I'm forgetting the name of it. Shame on me. Forgive me. But in Shakespeare, head down Highway 78, just past the lights at Shakespeare. The fire hall's on the one side, and Shakespeare Brewing is there. You cross the lights, and then there's an ice cream shop and the little British shop I can't remember the name of, but Picnic. I might have to look for it next time I'm in there. Grant, did you find a way to care yet? You said earlier you couldn't care less. I know, I hung up on you. I was just being a jerk.
That's okay.
Okay.
Russell's Stover.
Oh, Russell Stover, yeah.
Stover.
You mean like
They
the
have-
assorted chocolates, the boxes?
No, it comes in a bag and it has no sugar added. It has, cane sugar is a little bit better for you. So these are like these are like peanut butter cup things.
I get it. Yep. I know what you mean. But Grant,
then
doesn't that take all the fun out of it if you're not having like straight on sugar?
No, I have to watch out for my blood pressure.
I know. I do too, but gosh darn it, I can't resist a crunchy bar, Grant.
Yeah, same here. I haven't eaten that in years.
Good for you. Russell Stover. No sugar added to help monitor Grant's blood sugars and blood pressure. You got to do what you got to do. I have a hard time saying no to the crunchy bar. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I think that commercial in that last break from Dana Short, Gourmet and Gifts, was a plant. I mean, we're talking about our favorite chocolate bars, and I know where I can find some good tasting sweets. I think I know where I'm stopping on the way home today, too. Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay, we are fast approaching. I mentioned earlier, my goodness, it's already Thursday. This week seems to be flying by. The day is flying by. Must be all the fun we're having. And we're coming up on the final hour of the show, which is always reserved for you and your ideas. The Talkback Hour from noon until 1, where we open up the phone lines and hear directly from you. If you've got something you need to get off your chest and onto the air, this is the way to do it. And I put my tin suit on because Paul called earlier and he emailed me afterwards and said, I can't believe you just said what you said. I'm going to call you out on that at noon today. So apparently I'm going to get into some trouble, and I'm going to take your calls as well. Talk back coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage out of sight, or you don't go out Friday night. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Each and every day at this time, we open the phone lines so we can let you do just that. Talk back. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. I have long told you that I am here for your feedback. If I do something that you don't like, you can tell me that. And so I'll just start by taking my medicine. He sent me an email and said he was going to call me back to call me out. So we'll start with Paul, find out why I'm in trouble. Hello, Paul.
This morning, we were discussing the different flavors of terrorism, of extremism, and whatnot. And after you cut me off, or as you were cutting me off, you raised the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa a couple of years back. We've got a group of Canadian truck drivers that had said enough is enough, and were protesting against the government's actions against them for trying to make it their own choice on something as simple as a vaccine. You chose that as your hill to stand on. What about the Palestinian terrorists supporting Hamas, burning Canadian flags, and calling for death to Canada on the streets of all our major cities?
Okay, but Paul, no, hang on. Paul.
Occupying universities, occupying public spaces, fires, bombings,
why do you,
police.
Paul, now hang on. Let's make this a conversation, okay?
I get my say, now you get your say.
Thank you. So when you called earlier, you wanted to make the point about, for example, in your words, the Palestinian terrorists that are supporting Hamas. I was making the point that even prior, there have been cases of extremism by everyday Canadians. It may not be the most extreme in your mind, but I would submit to you that the government's mandates were viewed by some as extreme, perhaps extreme left, and the convoy protesters were on the further edges of the right. Extreme Canadians.
Further edges of the right, they were in the center. All they were looking at was freedom.
Well, the polls dispute that entirely, Paul. Most of us in the center were following along with mandates and trying to manage as best we could. And the polls continue to show that. Yesterday
on CBC, I have the clip queued up. I could play it for you, but I'll just tell you, unless you want me to play it, an RCMP officer stating that, people with that are going to more traditional Canadian values are extremists. That's what an RCMP officer said on CBC radio yesterday.
What are these? What? An RCMP officer said
that people with traditional Canadian values are extremists.
What traditional?
On CBC radio.
To which traditional Canadian values was this officer referring?
What she said was anybody who's leaning towards traditional Canadian values could be considered an extremist.
This sounds out of context to me.
Would you like me to play the clip for you?
Sure.
I can do it.
Okay. Make sure it comes through so we can all hear.
Are leaning towards traditional values, and that might be a sign that they're becoming more extremist. But we also have to remember that having the most extremist views is perfectly legal in Canada.
Were you able to hear that?
For the most part, but in what context was that comment made? What are the traditional Canadian values that she is referring to?
Maybe do what's right, obey the laws.
Well, there's nothing
do
extreme.
unto others as you would have others do unto you.
There's nothing extremist about that, though. There's context missing from that clip, Paul.
Apparently, she thinks there is.
This was
on CBC.
Yeah, we need
RCMP officer
to answer what question? Like, that is so out of context. It's not even funny.
He was discussing the whole bit about these.
I'll tell you what. Here's the
so-called extremists in Montreal. This is what they were discussing.
I'll tell you
the
what.
fact that there was military people involved in it as well. This is what they were talking about, and she said that people with traditional Canadian values are extremists.
Okay, so again, I'm going to insist, way out of context. However, it's possible there was a misspeak there. But more than anything, how about this for an outcome? Just don't listen to CBC radio, Paul. How about that? Huh?
It just showed up in a Facebook feed.
Aha!
It's
see
only,
now, hang on. I wonder then, Paul. It just showed up. I thought better of you, sir. I thought better of you.
I normally listen to CBC.
Yeah, no, but that's.
But
I doubt.
CBC,
No,
July
stop it.
9th.
I doubt now even the veracity of that.
Would
Completely.
you like me to play the entire clip?
I would like you to show me. Paul. I want you to send me the actual interview from CBC. I don't want to hear. No, I'm not going to hear the nonsense, Paul. Stop the nonsense. Paul, I'm going to put Paul back on hold. This is a problem. This is a real problem. Paul does a good job, usually, of doing the research on the points he likes to make. I don't believe for a second that this came from an actual interview. And if it did, I want to hear the full context because there's a lot of context missing there. It's your Talkback Hour. We can talk back to one another. It's a conversation on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Along with Paul, who wanted to give me heck and warned me when he called earlier, Mary also called earlier. We didn't get a chance to talk to her, but she's back. Hi, Mary.
Hey, I'm not going to give you heck.
I know you're not.
No.
Anyway,
always interesting. But you have to be on your guard to make sure he's telling you the absolute truth. But I'm glad he calls in. I was calling about when the Montrose, the flooding and that, because I lived in New Hamburg.
Oh, of course, yes.
The Nith River.
Yep, another flood-prone area of our region.
Yeah, well, if you look, the Nith River, it winds all around New Hamburg, and the banks are not that deep. And as I said to you one time, if you go overlooking, it looks like a little German town nestled in the valley. So what happens? It floods. So I was 2 streets away from people that got flooded all the time. And when we bought the house, I can't remember. I mean, that was when I was 1996. So I was just a young'un. However, most of the homes there, the furnaces were put on like a cement, raised them because of it, so that they wouldn't get stopped in a flood.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you don't think of that. Anyway, the one might have been Hurricane Hazel. I'm not sure. And water came up fast, and it came up and flooded our backyard too. And the kids were out there in the canoe and having a grand time.
I'll bet they were.
They thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. You got to go with the flow.
Go with the flow.
Make lemonade out of lemons.
I like the go with the flow pun when we're talking about flooding, Mary. Good job.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Anyway, you have yourself a great day.
Thank you. You too. I'm looking forward to joining my friends in Petersburg for the Bechtold Barbecue. It's underway, got started at 11, continues until 6 out there on Notre Dame Drive. Warren Bechtold in his 21st year of this fundraising barbecue for research into childhood cancer. Love it. Stop by. Support. Perfect day for it. Dennis, you're on Talkback. Good afternoon.
Yeah, Mike, can you hear me good?
Yes, I can.
Good. You got my blood pressure up there with that comment when you're talking to Paul about the truckers being on the extreme. First of all, that happened in January, almost 2 years into the whole COVID thing. We mandated harder and longer than anywhere else. In the fall before that, September, October, Michigan had the queen of lockdowns, Whitmer. And I attended more than once University of Michigan football games with 105,000 people in the fall. And Trudeau and the feds had a 72-hour negative PCR test, when you return to Canada. I got the test in Waterloo before I left. Once January came around, there was no trucker protest if Trudeau had spoken to the nation and defended his policies. He didn't because he couldn't.
And Dennis, I hope you also heard when I made that comment about the convoy and the protests around it, that it could be argued that where we were at federally, our government at that time was leaning extreme left. So, okay, so there you go. So the response to that extremism was maybe a little bit of extremism on the other side.
No, Canadians across the board were out on overpasses and cheering them on, and it went on for several days. And Trudeau could have stopped it.
I push back on that. I think he should have met. I agree with that, but not Canadians across the board. And I said that to Paul too. And you can still look up, the polling that said the vast majority of us, Dennis, frustrated as we may have been, went along and tried to follow along to get through this.
Yeah. But just so you know, in the 1930s, my uncle was the leader of the On to Ottawa protest. It started in BC in labor camps, and they were going across the country on the top of railroad cars. And they stopped in Regina, and the government talked to them. Government leaders got together and talked to them, tried to head it off. It didn't actually work out. There ended up being violence. I don't know if you know, there's some people killed. My uncle actually was one of the people that went to jail as one of the organizers. But that was, they talked. Trudeau and company didn't talk. In fact,
I agree, and I think Trudeau they should have.
Company, Mike, I was on the pandemic planning task force for Ontario after SARS. No one read the plan. I was on there with, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, the medical officer of health for 10 years, the predecessor. He raised issues. He was shut down by government and the media who enabled it. Anyway, I think the truckers were brilliant. That's my view.
All right. And Dennis, I appreciate that. And, to paint every one of those people who went to, yes, you people who went to Ottawa in protest with an extremist brush would be wrong. Absolutely. But the roots of it and the parties involved who were ultimately brought up on charges, oh my God. Look, the whole thing was a big, fat mess. But I will maintain that you could make the argument that the government and its long, drawn-out standing mandates were leaning towards extremism on the left, and the roots of that protest leaning towards extremism on the right. The rest of us in the mushy middle, all I'm trying to point out. Talkback continues on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. It's like a throwback Talkback today because we're back in pandemic times. Paul was still on hold because he was playing audio I couldn't verify earlier. Are you feeling better, Paul?
I'm still waiting to. I found the original without just that clip. If you'd like me to send you the entire thing,
well, if I
prove its accuracy,
I'd love the video straight from the CBC. Yes, please.
Okay,
no, Paul, stop playing it.
I'm not
playing
playing it. I'm I'm looking at it. It lists her name out, everything else.
Yeah, I get that. But, Paul, listen, I did as much searching as I...
said was
Paul,
that
can you
people
stop
with
interrupting me for a second?
Canadian values
Okay, I'm done.
could be
Paul,
extremists.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I also, as best I could, in commercial breaks here, looked up as much as I could, and I found it on Juno News, Rebel News, The Western Standard, and Canada Proud. What does that tell you?
It means that CBC pulled it back because of the embarrassment. When an RCMP officer says that Canadians with traditional values are extremists.
But you are misquoting, Paul. That's not the direct quote even. It's not the quote.
Okay, if you like me word for word, that would take time.
Well, but you are usually good at this. This is the problem, right? Like you want to believe this. I get this. And clearly these websites want you to believe this. But why do you think that is?
Why do you think it is that you would use the Freedom Convoy as an example when you've got Palestinians burning houses?
Because it's also an example.
Storefronts, cars,
I'm not going to...
Threatening to put a cop 6 feet under.
Okay, because, Paul, I didn't want your narrative to stand that extremism is only on the rise in Canada because we have imported extremism from other parts of the world. We can be extreme. Look at the people who are accused.
We are not extremists in Canada. It's just that the Liberal government has gone so far to the left.
Extreme.
It makes us
extreme left.
Right.
Extreme left.
Right.
Right. So we are extremists in Canada.
Being extreme right.
Oh, Paul, but then you just said we both just agreed that the previous Liberal government went extreme left. But you said there's no extremists in Canada. Which way do you want it?
There's no right extremists.
Oh, there's no extremists on the right,
I'm not
only on the left.
But there's no right extremists.
Well, then there you go.
But the people in Canada are more towards the center than the extreme left Liberal government.
Agreed. 100% we are. But to suggest...
So why do you use the Freedom Convoy, which was just a bunch of Canadian truckers?
Told you.
Why didn't you use the Palestinian protesters?
Told you the answer.
Canadian flags and calling
Paul,
on death to Canada.
Shame on you today. Shame on you today. Yes, we have seen extremism from these folks at these rallies that you are referring to. But I won't let that stand as the only sign of extremism. That's all I'm trying to point out. And are most of us in the middle? Absolutely, we are. We've seen some extreme left maneuvers from our federal government. We've seen some extreme right responses. That's it. It's that simple. And it happens in Canada today, yesterday, and many years before. We brought in a whole bunch of new people with different views. Simple as that. I think this email from Todd sums up the first 30 minutes of Talkback today rather nicely. Hi, Mike. Todd writes to Mike at 570news.com. Does your previous caller think that driving around in a vehicle with an F. Trudeau flag or sticker on the back for the last number of years is not extremism? I don't remember seeing those types of stickers from the Liberals directed towards the Conservatives. Just saying. And I think that sums it up because there's the view of somebody, obviously, who, while may not have been happy with mandates during the pandemic, didn't choose that path of response and or protest. Could be viewed, from Todd's perspective, as extreme in one direction. That's all I'm trying to point out. And we Canadians are capable of it. Not all of us. Some of us are. Let's get back to the phones. More conversation is good. Nathan, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Oh, boy. Paul's got me a little off of what I wanted to talk about. But, yeah, I witnessed extremism on the right. What would you call a white power march in London, Ontario? Me and my wife witnessed one with our own eyes, unfortunately. But, yeah, it exists. Anyway, I wanted to give a shout-out to Terry for helping me talk some sense into you with the Friday music. I'm calling today because I'm leaving to the cottage in the morning, so with theming it. So, he's come up with a couple ideas. You could probably get some other callers to give some ideas or make it topical for an event or time on the calendar. But yeah, big shout out to Terry because you seem to agree with him. So, hey, let's go. And enjoy a big turk and relax once in a while, would you?
Okay, settle down. I'm going to hang up the phone on you for that. Jiminy Christmas with the big turk. Go to the Crushed Almond Cafe. Get the real stuff. I'll just leave it there and not go down that path any further. But yes, listen, there's no market cornered on good ideas. Nathan had suggested some time ago to theme the All Request Friday. I didn't want to make it that much work, but apparently it's not. You have fun with that. So our theme for All Request Friday tomorrow, when you send in your requests, make them songs from movie soundtracks. Those are the songs we'll play on our All Request Friday tomorrow, okay? Nathan was right. I should have done this a long time ago. James, you're on Talkback. Good afternoon.
Oh, Big Mike, what a day, huh? What a day, brother.
It is a day, let me tell you. It feels like 2 days.
Geez, you got some good temperament, buddy. I'll say that's for sure.
Yeah, I try. I think I'm not usually that tempered, but here I am.
Hey, just a quick couple points.
Sure.
Talking about all the protests and whatnot. We talk about St. Paddy's Day and the police, how much it costs us to police these events. How come nobody talks about all these protests that go on for other countries in our country that cost us money? It doesn't make any sense. We never hear any of the facts or the figures how much it costs to police all these protests, especially like in Toronto, because it's happening all the time there. And then second point I make, that gentleman on this morning, that professor that said he had total belief in the RCMP. Well, how long has Doug Ford been under investigation for the Greenbelt scandal? And he still hasn't been even interviewed as far as I know.
Well,
and, lastly, lastly, I'll just say, you're going to have a great summer anyway, Mike. You got big Aaron Rodgers there for you, brother.
Oh, come on. I'm going to hang up on you now, too. Why you want to hurt me today? First with the Big Turk chocolate bar, now with the geriatric quarterback that my football team has signed. Come on. Give a poor guy a break, would you? I think when it comes to the management of other protests, I think we're comparing a little bit of apples to cantaloupes in that regard. This is just the cost of doing business, if you will, in policing these days. Peaceful protest is allowed, if not encouraged, under our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The St. Paddy's Day party and all of the illegal behaviors, frankly, in terms of peaceful assembly, the size of the crowd, the open alcohol, I could go on, is not allowed. And so we look at that as what we spend to control something illegal, whereas protests, no matter how frequently they are happening, it's kind of the cost of doing business in policing these days. That's my take on it, but appreciate you raising the point. Preston Paul, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. Shout out to Three Musketeers and Cherry Blossom.
Oh, Cherry Blossom. They also discontinued that one. Thank goodness. I didn't like the Cherry Blossom either, Paul.
I love those. Those were good. Anyways, talking about extremism, it's not the protest, it's how they did their protest. And most of this, if it wasn't for the internet where they're so easy to be able to push a button and be able to just connect with all these crazy people that have all these views, and they ramp each other up and say, yeah, we're going to do this. Back in the day, they might find 3 or 4 people that they might know that might feel that way. Now they just click a button and there's like thousands of them there. And what do you do about it when they're out there talking on the internet? So what do you think of that?
I think you're spot on with one of the problems that we are going to have a very difficult time reining in. No question.
We're too soft as a country. We don't get on top of these things, and that's what floors me. Like, again, common sense. It's like the Wild West out there. And now you can't stop it. Like, I don't know where you go from here, right? So, anyways, you have a great day, Mike.
Thanks, Paul. Great to hear from you. You have a great day too. The barn door on that, as far as I'm concerned, is so wide open, we're never going to pull it closed again. That being the ability to connect online, which at its heart is such a wonderful thing, right? Like back in the day, if I may use the phrase as the old guy in the room, Facebook and reconnecting with friends from long time ago and learning what they're up to and all of that stuff. Like, this is a great thing. But it also now becomes a place where we can connect with like-minded individuals, and all of a sudden it becomes a place where we think, oh, we'll find our own echo chamber, right? They think like I do. And it becomes a pretty vicious cycle the more people that get into that group, and then, boy, oh boy, we end up with extremism. And you know that recruiting is going on within those online communities. There's no question about it. Talkback continues on the Mike Farwell Show this afternoon, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every day we set aside an hour exclusively for you, giving you the chance to get something off your chest and onto the air. 519-570-2545. Star 570, 1-800-570-5715. Back to the phones. Francis, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You know, I'm really tired of all the stupid arguing that's going on back and forth. You know, we got to lighten things. It's just too hot out there. And I understand you've changed the songs for tomorrow. I put a request in for tomorrow. This is because you enjoyed people waving at you and how big your head was. So I really wanted them to play, "Oh Lord, it's so hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way."
Maybe we'll sneak it in anyway, Francis.
Yeah, well, I hope so, because I heard you're going to change it. Now, here's pictures of a little old grumpy guy, somewhere in middle age, and he says, "Old? Me? Oh no. I'm in the prime of my life. I'm somewhere between the young and the restless."
Somewhere between the young and the restless.
Yeah, there used to be a TV show of The Restless.
I think I heard about that one.
God bless.
You too, Francis. Thank you for the call. I certainly concur with the need for a little bit less arguing. I worry sometimes, I do, that we're getting sucked into things here. And just remember, what we see on the internet is exactly what the internet wants us to see. The algorithm is in charge, not you. Believe you me. It's fascinating to me. Two things. One, the different things that my beloved and I see online just because of our habits, right? I am inundated now in terms of our scrolling habits or the things that we click on that we're interested in, right? Because that just feeds more information to the algorithm, which keeps pushing back out the same kind of content. And so if you are inclined to believe that an RCMP sergeant made some comment about traditional values being extreme, then that's what you're going to get fed, and you'll get a good, healthy dose of it. The other thing that fascinates me is when you talk about a certain issue and all of a sudden, or a certain product or whatever, an item, and all of a sudden they start showing up in your feeds because these things are paying so much attention to us. These things, by these things, I mean the phones that we all carry on our person each and every day. I look so forward to the day where I can just say, you know what, I think I'm done with this. I'm going back to the good old-fashioned flip phone, just in case of an emergency or something like that. On a much lighter note, I was going to ask you this question at the beginning of the Talkback Hour, but Paul was there. Paul told me he was going to give me heck. I didn't want to keep him waiting any longer. I'm here to be constructively criticized, or maybe not even constructively, if the situation warrants. But during the noon news, I went to our kitchen here at the radio station and I grabbed my lunch. And in the fridge is a couple of cans of beer. Now, please don't nobody's in trouble here. It's not open. We don't drink at the workplace. It's not something that happens. Nobody's doing that. But here's the thing. These cans of beer have been in the fridge all week. Or maybe they showed up Tuesday. So this would be the third day. Could have been. Either way. I knew the moment they have, by the way, the cans of beer in our fridge have sticky notes on them. indicating who they belong to. But I knew the second I opened the fridge, without even seeing the name on the can, I could tell by the design that it came from my favorite craft brewers here in the region. Shout out to my friends at Block 3 in St. Jacobs. I knew what kind of beer it was just by the colors and the design on the label without even seeing the name. And then I saw one of the owners and I said, that's a insert beer name here, isn't it? Oh yeah, she says. The thing is this, I get that you put the label, you have claimed it, you have made it clear to your coworkers that this is your can of beer. Take it home. Drink it. Because I'll tell you what, I'll tell you how long that beer would last in my hands or my household or my fridge. Not this long. So despite the fact that you have laid claim to the can of beer by putting a sticky note on it with your name, my question to you is, for how long does that apply? Because this is at least 3 days, maybe 4, that I've gone to the fridge, opened it, and saw the can of beer staring me right in the face. There's got to be some sort of statute of limitation on the sticky note here. It can only apply, not literally, because somehow, even in the fridge, it's still sticking, but it can only apply for a certain period of time. You claim the can, take it home. Now you're just teasing the rest of us. I guess what I'm getting at is, I think I should be able to drink the beer, no? Or at least take it home with me. It'll go to a good home and a good belly. I promise you that. This is the Mike Farwell Show. Your Talkback Hour continues. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Rob sends me an email to Mike at 570news.com, says, you have a drinking problem. Yeah, the problem is I can't drink the beer that's in the fridge here at work. Put a sticky note on it. You think that forever claims the beer as your own? I'd like to point out, too, that when I am so fortunate as to be gifted the occasional beer, I bring it in for the class to share. Not all of it. I know they only have one can each, but I'm thinking the statute of limitations on the sticky has got to be up by now. George, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mike. I looked it up, the limitation on those beers.
And?
It's 5 days. So tomorrow afternoon, if it's still there, you can scoop it up and take it on your way home for the weekend.
Boom. Done. And how are they going to blame me when I come back the next week?
Exactly. I found it on the internet, so you know it's true.
George, that is perfect. Thank you very much. Hey, Robin and PJ, you better go get your beer out of the fridge because Farwell's getting thirsty. Greg, good afternoon.
Okay, well, I think my thunder was half stolen there. I was going to say about, put a limit on it. But then, if it was ever into sticky notes, just put one of your own on saying, okay, this time tomorrow, this is now fair game. And then whoever's been looking at it and not moving it, if they see your sticky note, well, then they've had fair warning, and then go for it and toss them back on the weekend.
It's interesting how we will communicate here in the communications business by way of sticky note.
Well, actually, that's what I was wondering, too, is everybody that just heard your dilemma that you work with, did they all hear it, or is not everybody listening to the show at any given time?
Wait a minute, Greg. Everybody listens to this show all the time. Okay. You know that.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
Then they've already had fair warning, then forget the sticky note. Just announcing, okay, this time tomorrow, deadline. Other than that, thank you. That's it.
All right, Greg. Appreciate the sentiment on that. I may actually do this the in-person way and march right into that studio tomorrow morning. It just occurred to me when I went out to grab my lunch at the noon hour. I'm like, wait a minute. This beer is still here. I think, frankly, I just want the beer to get the treatment that it deserves because it's delicious and it shouldn't just sit there in the fridge. I also recognize I should add another twist to the story. These poor coworkers both have been victimized by people assuming stuff in the fridge was for everybody when it was only for them. So I understand why they put the sticky notes on this time, because they don't want people thinking, oh, look, free beer. I get that part. But come on with your coming on here. For how many days do we have to stare at that cold, delicious beer with your name on the sticky note? I think if you really wanted the beer, it's one can of beer. How can you not take it home with you? So I'll march into that studio first thing tomorrow morning and just check in on it and say, listen, it's Friday. It's a good day for a frosty Sud missile. Oh, trust me, it is. And if you don't take your Frosty Sud missile from Block 3 home with you, I'm taking it home with me. I'm going to make sure this beer goes to a good home, and we'll see what they say. I'm not trying to steal something from somebody. Again, I just think this beer in particular deserves to be treated with a little more respect. If it was mine, well, let me tell you, it wouldn't be sitting in the work fridge all week long. We have one day left together in our week on our show tomorrow, including our Friday 4 roundtable discussing the week's big stories, free phones Friday from noon until 1. We're going to talk about this awesome new initiative in the Preston area of Cambridge that is bringing people together. A 12-year-old that will blow your mind with his efforts to fundraise, and how some water users in Kitchener are saying, hey, city, why are you blocking our access to the waterways? That's all coming up on tomorrow's show. Let's get back together at 9, okay? I'm Mike Farwell. Bye for now.